Good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone to our actually bi-monthly presentation discussion session. And we actually have two items to discuss today. We're going to have a Tanglewood Business Park update. We've had several discussions with it, and this is kind of an opportunity to get a culmination, as well as a work in progress on emergency services update following that. So we are ready to begin. So Kirby, you're up. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Board. Before I came over, I make sure I practice saying good morning instead of good afternoon. And so far, so good.
Good.
Right. Appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion item with you today. I thought I would just sort of step back in time to begin and say, and as the board knows, with respect to the Tanglewood Business Park property, the county began developing it for commercial use in 2016. And that was really in response to sort of the perceived need for employment centers or additional employment centers in the county. A portion of that property, as you know, was previously sold, but due to contract issues and really related to some off-site infrastructure improvements required by the village, was later repurchased by the county. It's been available for sale since that time, and the idea there is not that necessarily the whole property has been for sale or targeted for sale for a specific or single buyer, but that lots within the property have been available for sale. Greater Winston has been our marketing arm there. They've helped us market the property as an economic development opportunity to potential industrial developers. And then, of course, at a recent bi-monthly session, the board discussed or heard the results of the industrial site selection survey. Part of what we asked HDR to do in that survey was specifically look at Tanglewood and say, is this a viable site for industrial development? And I think part of the reason we did that is, you had the 2018 offer on the property and we sold it, 14 acres of it. But really since that time, I think we've struggled to find a buyer for it or to know what necessarily to do with the property. That report said that yes, it is a viable site for commercial industrial development, but several improvements really are needed to make that site more attractive to developers. And I think the idea there is that to the extent you can lower the upfront cost and work to a developer going into a site, the more attractive it is to them, of course, as a buyer. The cost of the improvements that HDR recommended were roughly $12 million. And they said, you really need turn lanes on Isles Road and Middlebrook. You need to signalize that intersection and then grade the site. So there were significant costs involved in that, mostly wrapped up in the earthwork. At that session, I think what we heard from the board is you may be interested in investigating a sale of the property. And so we started doing some work around that, and that's, of course, where we are today. As a reminder of sort of the site profile, roughly 167 acres in size, and you have two different zoning classifications that are out there now. You have general industrial on sort of the northern side, RS40 on kind of the eastern and southern side of the property. And I'll say that those are the existing zoning classifications that were out there when the county acquired the property in 2000. The estimated market value, and this is from a commercial real estate firm that looked at the property with HDR, is roughly $4 million, as is for the whole property. More background on the property here, and you can see it, of course, highlighted in orange. Really, despite the need for additional improvements out there, HDR still noted that the existing site improvements have not only increased the value of that property, but made it a viable site for development. So in other words, the money that the board has invested in the property has made that viable for development. A couple of high-level idea or snapshot of those improvements. You started in 2016 with the initial design and engineering work. Of course, I can take no credit for that. My predecessor, Deputy Manager Haney, did all that work. And that was around the geotechnical, the survey, the wetlands delineation, the programming of what sites could be developed there. There was a lot of work just on the front end of what could be done with that site and preparing it for sale. You have construction of the sewer lift station that's on the southern end of the property there. That was really, part of a planned extension of the sewer system. And then you have the access road that comes adjacent to Fox Park and runs through the property. And then you have the in-progress sewer installation that's going on now with the Utilities Commission that the board heard more about this past Monday. kind of high-level look at the investment the board has made in the property. You funded site improvements using a combination of general fund and PAYGO dollars and leverage loans and grants as well. The largest site improvement, of course, was construction of the sewer lift station. That was funded through a loan from the state's Clean Water Revolving Fund that matures in 2040. That was a large investment in the property, but it really was a regional development as well. I mean, it opens up that basin for development beyond the Tanglewood Business Park property. The only active project that's going on now is the installation of sewer through the property that the Utilities Commission is leading. That's funded, of course, with a North Carolina Department of Commerce grant. You can see on the right side of the screen kind of high-level revenues and expenditures. There's a net positive balance in the account now. And I will say that, the sewer installation through the Utilities Commission has not been bid. The estimates are about the grant amount, roughly $2.4 million. When you get those bids back, there could be a need for some additional budget in that project, and that's sort of what that cash could be used for as well. So, if the board wants to sell the property, we sort of sat back and thought about, what are some things we should think about prior to kicking off that process? And I really started with kind of these sort of three buckets, but the first one I started with was sort of the method and the goal of sale, and I'll explain that a little bit. That, obviously we would recommend using negotiated offer, advertisement, upset bid with the goal of obtaining fair market value. The reason I think it'd be important to kind of restate that would be, number one, that the board may be interested in pursuing a sale of the entire property, but also it gives us good direction through that process of what you're looking for. Would you entertain a sale of a portion of it, or do you want to target the whole thing? It also gets the conversation started, I think, in the real estate and development communities when that message kind of goes back out and is refreshed in that environment. The second, you have restrictive covenants on the property. Those restrictions were placed on the property in 2018 as part of the Beaufort sale, and they're meant to control the use, development, and maintenance of the property. They run with the land, so if you sold the property or a portion of the property, those covenants run with it. They're there for 20 years. I think they renew in successive 10-year increments. They restrict the property to specific light industrial uses. You could remove those prior to sale. In talking with the county attorney today, they don't really make sense if you were to sell the whole property. We essentially restricted our own property. They're meant to control kind of how individual owners on the property would interact with each other. It's kind of a homeowners association type of setup. They don't really make sense staying on the property if you market the whole 167 acres for development. And then you have the rezoning question. You saw you have two zoning classifications out there now. You have general industrial and RS40. You could rezone the property prior to sale. That theoretically could limit interest from developers who may be interested in doing something different out there. That's a control part of the sale. You could potentially support a rezoning as part of a sales contract with a future buyer. And that's really the Sturmer Park model. And so you had Sturmer Park where, you had a buyer that wanted to come out and do something different on 3 acres there or 3.5 acres there that was different than what the existing zoning classification allowed for. And the board supported their petition to rezone the property. So that's another way you could do that. And then you could have a buyer that is okay developing the property under the existing zoning classifications. And this is really just kind of a wrap-up slide to kick off some discussion. If you do want to move forward with the sale of the property, we had a couple of recommendations. The first is, and again, this is not legally necessary, I don't think, but to instruct the county manager to sell the property for fair market value using the upset bids process. Or, if you wanted to take a different approach, you could do that, but some instruction to the manager on what you're looking to do there, how you'd like us to go through it, because that really shapes the marketing campaign around the property. Instructing staff on how to proceed with respect to the property's restrictive covenants and existing zoning classifications. Do you want to go ahead and dissolve the restrictive covenants? As I understand from the attorney, you can do that. Do you want to rezone the property prior to sale? How would you think about a rezoning from a potential buyer? Based on your direction there, we will develop a marketing campaign, and I want to kind of detail what that would look like, because if you wanted to see something different there, we can certainly do that. We would place a physical sign on the property. We would list it on commercial real estate websites. That's like kind of your LoopNet and the type of things you would expect to see commercial sites listed on. We'd communicate with local and regional realtors associations, get them involved. We'd post notice on the county's website, social media, et cetera. So that's sort of what that comprehensive campaign would look like. We always ask interested bidders to tell you a couple of things when they make an offer on property. And that's always the big question that I get is, what does the board want to see? Like, in terms of, we want to make an offer, what do you want? That's kind of what they say. So, well, typically a letter of interest is a great place to start. I think that's a good thing to share with the board. It tells you their name, their offer amount, and we really ask them for the description of their intended use of the property. Nothing in that, confines them to that specific use. It's always just, what do you want to do with it? And that sometimes changes over time. But we always say, for now, what are you thinking? Bidders are also required to state their proposed terms of sale. And we always try to do some negotiation around that. If we get a serious offer around, we want to minimize the seller, the due diligence period. If they want to rezone the property, what do they want to rezone it as, to see if you would support that, et cetera. Offers also can be solicited for a specific period of time. So we can say we're going to open a window for 90 days, submit your offers, typically on day 89, people will do that. Or we can bring them to you as we receive them. So there's two different ways we can go through. And we've done both ways in the past. And sometimes if you set a specific offer window and that expires, then we just go into sort of a rolling time. And those are things that I think developers and buyers are going to be interested in knowing. It's good to be clear on the front end with them so they kind of know how to shape their process. So that was a brief and high-level presentation on Tanglewood Business Park. Really meant to kick off some discussion, and we're here to answer your questions.
Questions for Kirby?
Well, I don't have questions, but the one thing I would like to do is to remove the covenants. I think that's important.
Forgive me, but this is property?
But
Yes.
they're right.
Yes.
And so if you pumped another 12 million in it to make it whatever we wanted it to be, that would be an $18 million investment up to this point.
You
18.7.
have a $6 million roughly investment in it now, yes, sir.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think, one little variable on the road issue is that Riverwalk has some road improvements to be done at certain points as it develops. And that would, I'm not so sure HDR took that into consideration when they were suggesting turn lanes for us and a signaling and turn lanes up at Middlebrook and all those things. Because part of that is both the DOT and Riverwalk, commitment. And we'd have to go back and kind of just check exactly what they were, but we had an awful lot of discussion about that because there were turn lanes that were going to be put at Middle Fork. Pretty sure the developer was responsible for that at some point because that whole discussion for 4 months was really about traffic. And I mean, Pat Ivy was in, we had a lot of discussions about that and what could be done. I'd say the only part that was not discussed were turn lanes for us for this development here. But there were other improvements discussed in the future, and that's kind of another part. I probably would not be in favor of getting into any of the road issues if we were to fix it up. I think the road issues are a decision for the kind of the future, depending on what the use became. But it's a bit. I have been thinking about it. It's a tough kind of decision to get at. Ideally, I think if you had a developer would buy it and sort of take it over and do all that and handle all these decisions and guesswork, and we're sort of out of it. If it gets into just for sale and people start coming in, well, I'd like this back 30 acres over here. I could do this thing, but whatever over here, and then it leaves this other part over here, and we kind of become a developer, and I'm not so sure. I think we kind of learned we're not developers. That's kind of where we started. And I'm not so sure that I think that's a good idea. I think the restricted covenants could certainly go, but and even the zoning issues give you, I mean, there's flexibility with the current zoning, but I think this board knows that depending on what they are, there's a long protracted period of public review and comment and the working with Clemens. I mean, it's just, we've been there and done that on this particular project. And if the more flexibility that's put into it, the more you open yourself up to repeated that kind of activity. I mean, there's another side of it. I was actually thinking that, used to hear that old expression that you make decisions in the cool of the day instead of the heat of the moment. And the cool of the day would be thinking about now kind of what really is the appropriate kind of thing that kind of, and we talk to the Clemens and we talk to folks and say, how could something be arranged that would be kind of, this is kind of, we're going to fix this so that as we sell it, it goes this way. And then you avoid the kick the can down to deal with, then you're dealing with the heat of the moment decisions when people come in. So I think there are just so many ways to go, but I think for me, bottom line is it needs to be sold. Now, how it ends up not being another start over of what the business park was almost. I mean, we want to try to avoid that, and I don't know how to do it. I'm just sort of thinking out loud a little bit.
Yeah, I think clarity on the front end to potential buyers of what you would want to sell is going to be really important, or you're going to get different offers. Like you said, you're going to get a 30-acre subdivision here or whatever it may be. And so if you're interested in selling the whole property, I'd recommend stating that. If you're open to portions of it, which is sort of where you are now, I think clarification around that is important.
Well, there certainly hadn't been much interest.
That's right.
Yeah.
For Riverwalk, there were requisite turn lanes, but the road cannot be widened because of the railroad, as I understand it. And the only access then is off 158, and it dead ends at the river. And the traffic there is already abysmal during rush hours. And you have a 500-unit planned residential development right adjacent to it or across the road from it, apparently. So it seems to me to be unfixable.
So I will just mention, when we were first looking at designing this, there were proposed two access and egress. So Topsider Drive, which is in the village of Clemens, was the initial access. It goes into Dillon Industrial Drive and then on to Idols. That's still possible. I think at the time, what held us up was there were substantial off-site improvements that actually we're talking about today, signalization, turn lanes that the village was going to require. But if someone were to develop the property, they could potentially have two access and egress owned to Idols Road.
And I would assume, nobody really talked a lot about this, but I think you could put a turn lane. You obviously can't relocate the railroad, but there is some space. I mean, there are a few elevation issues, but obviously you could create, and there is, I guess, a turn lane with Riverwalk. So if that were all tied in together, you could probably extend that period. I mean, it'd be two payers here, to do that. There's probably a way to get a turn lane into that site. The Topsider part requires huge development up at where you see in that map on Idols Road runs into that area it was going to have to be signaled, and it was going to have to be able to have tractor trailers, kind of a more improvement of turn lanes. Those are big turn lanes to turn trucks, and that development of to get in the backside was really complicated. And of course, that's the city of Clemens in that area there too. And that's part of the reason it was abandoned, and we said we're going to create, and we got actually fairly quick approval from the railroad about the crossing, the grade crossing, and all that kind of business to get in there, and did our separate road just to stay out of that. But that was it was a long, drawn out process.
Well, unless someone wants to throw a bridge over the Yadkin River, it would appear to me that other potential access points to Idols Road south of 158 would be access to Gridlock.
Well, what is the Idols Road doesn't run into the river. It quits, but you can turn, when you get to the end of Idols Road, you can turn left. And then it takes you up to the golf course up there, to the that subdivision? What is the name of that?
Doc Davis Road. Doc Davis Road is, you can turn off of that left on the Doc Davis Road.
Which you can't see on this map. It goes
No, I
down
don't
further
believe so.
where it runs. And then
You can see a portion of it, but you can't see where it turns on the southern side.
Yeah, okay, the Doc Davis Road, and so it comes down as it comes out. Yeah, there it is, and there's the subdivision and golf course up at the top. It goes down and then comes up. You can't see off the map. You see that little part that says OCK Davis Road? It kind of keeps running down and actually runs into where Idle's dead ends. And so you go down and turn that, and then it goes up around and goes out that, and I don't know all where that road goes, but you keep going. I guess it eventually runs back into, I don't know where it goes. I'm not going to
It
speculate.
loops back out to Hampton Road.
Hampton Road, okay. Okay.
I had one question that I'd been thinking about with regard to this property. Given the difficulties in developing it as an industrial site, would there be a better market if we simply got it rezoned all to residential and put it up for that purpose?
I mean, I imagine you'd have some interest out there. I mean, and that's part of the strategy. If you put it out on the market and maybe don't state that use, you could get a variety of offers, and you can choose to advertise one for advertisement upset bid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that seems like a possible approach. And I know what the county was trying to do several years ago by choosing this, but it doesn't seem to have worked out particularly well for a number of factors. And now it's sitting in our hands, and we're not getting much use out of it. So I'd recommend considering that as an option.
I think that change in use could affect, obviously, the roadway improvements that are required, and maybe even the grading that's required in the site too, is you don't have to have large industrial-sized pads.
Other comments?
Well, I definitely am in favor of placing it on the market, and I want to keep it as simple as possible. I would like to remove the covenants, but, we've gone down this road before and had a great opportunity, but Clemens Council stepped in and went to the folks and told them that they didn't want them there. And so they left. But we still need to try to sell this property. It's just, we've worked on it for years and years, and I'd like to see it go on the market again.
But is it not on the market right now?
Kind of. It's, and I'll just be honest. When I get calls about this, I say, yes, that the board, this is advertised on Greater Winston site. Here's a conceptual master plan that shows the lots that are potentially available there. I think the board would entertain an offer. Folks are a little scared away because they don't know necessarily what potentially this board would want to see happen there. I think that's a fair comment based on the feedback that I've heard from folks that may offer or may potentially make offers on that. But also, we're catching up, I think, with sewer going in out there that that'll help that. That's just what folks say when they call. And so, yes, I mean, I think that it is available for sale. I think clarifying, what's for sale. Do you want to sell the whole thing or parts of it? For what, if anything there is important and would help shape sort of a marketing campaign to bring you a buyer.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to respond to Commissioner Bessie's comment, right now, the restrictive covenants prohibit residential construction there. So right now, if we sold it as is, it could not be residential. The danger in us rezoning now is we don't know the density. Even if you wanted residential, we don't know the density that a developer would want. And so there's a real danger that we could rezone it and then it would need to be rezoned again. So that may be typically what you do in a sale of a property is that's a condition that the developer or the purchaser puts on it when they buy it.
Lift station that was there on this
Yes, sir.
What was our part of the cost of that? Was it like 4 or 5 million?
$4.9 million loan, I believe, yes, sir. And then you have the interest that accrues on it.
Well, help me with my memory a little bit. Who all, is that lift station operational now?
I could speak to that. Yes, sir, it is. So just looking back at kind of what the history was, Davie County had built a lift station, was in the process of building a lift station on their side of the river to pump over into our system. It was going through our property, and so at the time, we would not be able to serve the property and surrounding properties with that. It was just a line going through the property. And so this board approved financing the lift station that was put on the property, which would then be able to open up this subbasin for sewer. So Davie County's flow is going through that, but there's nothing that's being collected from that region because there's not an outfall. That's what Utilities is currently working on constructing.
Well, it would seem like to me it was talked about at some point, it's been some time back, that the Tanglewood, is it hooked into it, to this, the newer pump station? Is it hooked into that, or it can be?
It is not currently. I'm not sure if there are plans to switch that over, but no, it is not connected to this.
But it could be.
I'll defer. I'm not positive.
Well, I know I remember some discussion about that, and I can't remember for sure where exactly it was coming from. Well, has Clemens at any time expressed interest in that? Because it seems like to me that I've heard discussion, all of us heard the same discussion, that Clemens might be reaching capacity of to the existing, I guess, outfall lines or pump stations that their sewage goes through. So is it or is it not whether Clemens has interest in that or might?
They are part of the $2.4 million. They're not in that $2.4 million, but they're part of that project to extend sewer up into the industrial area here. That's the extent of my knowledge there. We haven't bid that yet, so we don't know how much that would be for them, but they're, of course, funding their own portion of that, but it would flow there as well.
I'm going off recollection here. I do remember when we looked at this and the construction, the identified subbasin for gravity service to this lift station really didn't go into Clemens. That area that Kirby was showing could be served, but I don't think it goes that far north. I think most of this, the area served is the unincorporated area.
Well, when the Davie County line was coming across, it seemed like the utilities folks said there was going to need to be one there. There needed to be one in order to make that Davie County line work. Is that, anybody have any?
Yeah, I think so. I think the issue was that it was, if it were just Davie County only, it would have been smaller. If they were building one a little bit larger, it would offer more capacity for Forsyth. And then, because it's bigger than it had to be just to do Davie. I think we're both going back on 9 years ago memory.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's coming. That's coming back. That we were, or at least I did, kind of fell for the idea that I wouldn't say anybody else did, that since you're going to put one there anyway, or one was going to be there, you put one for bigger capacity, and then, the Forsyth and that particular area right there could hook into it. So I fell for that, and I don't know where, I guess some others did too, because we put money in it. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely, and we thought we were gonna have a business park out there too. I mean, we thought we were gonna have a business park, and that we already had a tenant, and we were gonna have this sewer connection, and we were gonna have all this, because that made a big difference for the buyer, is whether they were gonna have some kind of treat on site, or they're gonna have access to a sewer. It had a lot to do with their development costs. And then we went into sort of just unbelievable discussions with Clemens at that time.
Well, I didn't think y'all let me go that far out to do something like that all by myself, but I didn't want to blame anybody but me unless.
I was right with you. I supported it too, I believe it was a unanimous vote. I think it was a unanimous vote that we moved forward on that, because at that time, we were thinking, business park, we already had a tenant, already had one buyer, with 100 employees, plus, as I recall. And there was a very different outlook at the time it got started.
The possibility of sale that's being discussed, the fact that lift station there has got to have made that property that we have more value.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so who's done
there's
that?
a lot of investment there. Obviously, the lift station's a huge part of that. And there's a lot of preliminary due diligence that a developer would want to see done that's been done. So the investment in the site makes it more valuable, yes, sir.
Is the estimated market value that you have in the report the same as your sales price range for this gym
For this gym?
property?
GEM.
As in GEM.
I was wondering, I was trying to figure out if a gym was allowed under GI or not. That is the market value that JLL gave for the property as is, and I'm not sure I'm answering your question with that.
So it's current?
Yes, sir, as in the last 2 months.
But it's not appraisal quality. I mean, they weren't doing official, that was not like an appraiser coming in and giving you.
There's a broker.
Value.
They're a broker that specialized in this type of land, but yes, sir, it was a broker's opinion of value. It was not an appraiser.
Okay, exactly.
I find those sometimes can be different. You're right.
Perhaps.
Mr. Attorney, a question for you. Your memory is really good too. How about going back a little ways and remind us all how the county ended up with that property to begin with? You know?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that was directed to me. So as I understand it, and this will probably be wrong, you're the one with the memory, so I will weigh in. I believe it was donated to the county to build another golf course way back when, maybe from the Reynolds family, or maybe we purchased it, I don't know, but it's been eons ago. But my recollection is that it was supposed to be another golf course, and it just never happened. And so the county has owned the property for many, many years, and then the former manager thought that it might be a good site for a business park, and that's when we got into all the discussions with the lift station.
Well, when at that time, it was Tanglewood Park Authority that was operating the park, and maybe part of it was donated. I don't think all of it was, because what had happened, the Park Authority had agreed to a certain amount of money to pay for it, and you're right about the another golf course, I guess, and then turned out they could not pay for it, and so that's when it came into the county ownership. And if you can look back and find it, I think it shows where the amount that they couldn't pay, the county ended up paying. And then it became the county property. Is that pretty close?
As I said, your memory's better than mine. I wasn't around when any of this
What they've got
happened.
written down on the records over there at where to keep the records is better than mine, because it's written down.
We can certainly look up that information. I will say I don't know. That's probably my best answer.
I actually had a cheat card sitting in the back. Chris Weevil's here, and he texted me. So it seems that the Tanglewood Park Authority acquired it from RJR for a golf training facility in 1996. So the old Tanglewood Authority acquired it.
But it was still, I'd like you to look and see it. I think that it was still the reason, and then soon after that, the Park Authority dissolved. The county took over the operations. But I do believe the county had to pay, there was some debt there, and the Park Authority couldn't pay it, and the county paid it. So maybe my
Chris Weevil says that's correct. Yeah,
Well-
we had to pay off the balance.
Okay. All right.
Sure.
So the property, it does for sure actually belong to the county, and that ought to be recorded to Register of Deeds. If anyone wants to check it and be sure that we own what it is we're talking about now. I'm
Perhaps-
confident that we do.
Yes, sir.
That's why we want to put it on the market.
Perhaps the village of Cleveland would be interested in acquiring it as an investment, extending, their village boundaries to, and then they would have zoning control as well.
The deed on file is November 21st, literally. We're almost at the 25-year anniversary of your acquisition. It was November 21st of 2000, and it was from the Tanglewood Park Foundation incorporated to the County of Versailles. So you've owned it for almost 25 years.
And the investments in it's more than 6.7 million.
One of the things that, and unless something else comes to mind, I'll slow down for a little bit. The thing that Clemens people, and maybe the town too, has always brought about any time that the county was getting ready to do anything out in that area, over there in the park itself, where first talked about the where the park is up at Tobaccoville now, where is more traffic, more people, more of everything. Well, it is one thing for certain. When you put sewer in place, there is going to be more of everything, and the bigger you make the sewer capacity, the bigger, more of everything it's going to be. So when we, or at least I fell for that, build a bigger lift station so it'll have more capacity, then that, since it's there, that automatically means there's going to be more of everything. If you don't want more of everything, then be careful where the sewer goes. The main lines. If anybody wants to argue against that, that's fine,
Absolutely right.
but it's the fact. So,
Would there be any advantage in turning the whole parcel over to a realtor? Was that contemplated in the selling part?
I never like to try to put myself out of a job, so I'll say that. That was a bad real estate joke. We could. I think what you'll have is typical for a seller to pay a commission. So you'll have, if we publish this to the Realtor Association, you will have realtors that you don't necessarily have a listing agreement with that will try and bring you offers for a commission. So I'm not sure I would, maybe to decrease that's a consideration. We've bounced that around a little bit internally too. I think you get more exposure, but we may be able to recreate some of that internally as well.
At the risk of being proven wrong, it appears that the foundation purchased the property for $900,000 in 1994, and as Mr. Murphy indicated, it was transferred to the county in the year 2000.
Part of the challenge, and add this, of using a broker, maybe that if they bring you an offer that fits within something that could happen there, they have an interest in wanting that offer to be accepted and go through the process. That can be a challenge with advertisement, upset bid, and maybe some of the dynamics that are around the property, whereas you have a little more flexibility if we're handling that.
The access there now across the railroad track close where I guess they're accessing the lift station and do the work that they've had to do in there. Is that, I haven't been by there and looked at that in a long time. Is that a viable, the way it is, crossing for a lot of traffic?
I think there are some roadway improvements that would have to happen there depending on what's crossing.
Yeah, it's a stub road. It was really to just get a road in place to access. I think there would probably need to be some improvements if there was a full development there.
Would there be some phases of that we could try something for, and then, like, for example, desire to sell the whole parcel, the whole 167 acres, say we want to sell all of it, and maybe that's, and remove the restrictions part that we have easy to do piece, remove that. We'd like to sell the whole parcel. We put it on the market for X number of days or X number of months and see if there's any interest. And then if not, we go to a different plan, which could be anything, just kind of that anything or everything will entertain all offers.
Yes, sir.
If you will. Or, I mean, there could kind of be,
I think you increase your likelihood of getting an offer. You put the whole property out, you remove the restricted covenants, and you say, tell us what you want to do with it, and if a rezoning would be involved, so you're aware of that,
Yep.
but you don't overly restrict it before you put it out on the market.
I agree.
would that be a reasonable start?
One side has nodded, the other side has gone, I haven't said anything.
It's contemplative. Would it make sense that we would put this, that we could all think about this and we could put it in the next cycle as an action to consider removing restrictions and selling as all together?
Yes, sir.
And then we can decide to say yay or nay, or come up with something else.
Yes, sir.
Sound reasonable?
I haven't seen the restrictive covenants, so I'd appreciate a copy of those.
We'll be happy to send it
All
to
right,
you. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on to our second topic, emergency services update.
I'll speak up here instead of behind there now. Good morning, Commissioners. So here this morning to provide an update on the emergency services assessment. Just as a reminder to the board, the manager's office hired North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting to assess our emergency services operations. Back earlier this year, that report was completed in June and presented to the board by the consultants in July at your bi-monthly morning session. And so I just wanted to kind of go back over some of the key takeaways from that assessment. We had started to operate as of March, actually. We had not replaced our emergency services director and allowed the 3 deputy directors to oversee fire, EMS, and 911 separately. And one of the main takeaways was really we had a lot of positive internal feedback from that structure. It really kind of boosted staff morale and felt that leadership was very good. The other key takeaway was really, these are core essential local government functions with their own unique complexities, but with that structure, we still had a very strong working relationship between the three areas. It did also have a number of areas of improvement that included, I tried to really grouped those into 3 different categories. So really some structural, organizational changes that would help us increase capacity, investments into facilities and fleets of some of the capital needs, and then modifying some operational strategies so that we could increase efficiency. The assessment did provide 27 recommendations for improvement across the 3 areas. I'll just say that some of those were more feasible in the short term than long term, and I think they were very clear in the assessment that was the case. You know, this assessment came to you in July after we passed a budget. Some of those changes were going to require some budgetary changes, and so we really kind of focused on what are the things we can do in the short term and what are the things that are really going to need to be talked about in the future budget cycles. I will, before I get into those recommendations and we'll go through those, I'll spend some more time on some of them than I will with others, but certainly if there's one that you want to hone in on, we can do that. I'll recognize that the 3 directors are here in the back as well as some of their staff, and so if we start to get in the weeds, I'm just going to tell them to come up and answer your questions because I'm not certainly the expert, and they are really leading some of these changes in the areas. So I know a lot of the assessment was focused on EMS. A lot of the data that was presented was on EMS, so we'll start there. And I broke this into kind of what recommendations we feel like have been completed substantially and what are some things that are still in progress. And so looking at what recommendations in the EMS area that we feel like have been addressed. So the first couple here, they keep the current organizational structure we talked about just now. So we made the decision not to rehire the emergency services director and promote all 3 of the deputy directors to directors of those areas. And that has been something that has continued to show some staff morale increase from that decision. And then also making some changes to span of control. So we talked about that organizational structural piece. So a number of the recommendations fell into, hey, you know, there are some key positions that would help with capacity for the directors so that they're not doing the work, you know, they're not answering the phones and trying to do the strategy. So in July, the manager's office had a number of reclasses and reorganizations that handled several of those. So it provided an assistant director in EMS. It worked on divvying up administrative positions between the 3 areas so that they had that function. And it also created a data analyst position. So these were some specific directions from the recommendations. So those top 4 here in the completed category all kind of were completed through that reorganization that we could do within the current budget. And that has paid some dividends. And then the 4th one here the 5th one here was reevaluating the use of the APCO emergency medical dispatch protocols with the medical director. That is something that we've been doing as well, working with our 911 staff. Yes, sir?
Would you, when you go through this, would you just mind explaining all the acronyms? What is APCO?
I'm going to let the 911 staff come up and talk through that. I mean, essentially, it's the way that when they answer a phone call, they have different cards, different questions, and the way that they are deciding who's getting dispatched.
Okay.
And so this was a specific
dispatch protocol.
Yes,
as
yes,
a
sir.
name.
And so what they've looked at is these cards to refine those to make sure that they are being efficient. I think that would be I don't know if you want to go into any more detail on that. Oh, come on up. This is Jamie Ford, our director for 911.
And during this, I looked through this, looking through this, does this also include, this has nothing to do with the first responders from all of our fire departments?
It does, sir. What that does is allow us to prioritize the calls. When the caller calls in, we've got about a 60 to 90-second window. So I would ask each of you to start a timer for 60 seconds, blindfold yourself, sit on your hands, and ask a series of questions to try to get that prioritization right. Priority 1 would dictate a fire and EMS response. If it was at a medical facility where you either had a nurse or a doctor on site, it would be an EMS-only response. That's what we refer to as a no squad. So the ambulance only would go. And you have priority 2 and priority 3 calls, which are your more low acuity calls.
Got it.
Yes, sir.
Got it. That's helpful.
So there's been intensive work working with the medical director at 911 to analyze what we had been doing and improve that over the last several months. So looking at some of the ones that are in progress here. So, and I'm going to come back to this one with bold because I think this one is really getting at some of that key data that we saw in July around response times, UHU. And so we'll come and talk about this in the next couple slides as well. But increasing the number of paramedic ambulances, especially during peak demand times, is something that we're There's some strategies that are being put in place now that I think will show some dividends, and have already shown a little bit of that we'll get into. Making modifications and improvements for facilities and reevaluating the EMS base locations and plan future locations. So obviously those are big capital items, and it's something that we are continuing to assess. This kind of goes along with what the board has approved for our fire study as well, which is ongoing. So we have North Carolina Fire Chiefs Consulting studying our fire system. Part of that is a station analyzation for fire stations throughout the county, where demand is and where those are located. And so we're really kind of going to look at all of our emergency services assets and think through where the best deployment locations are. So this is ongoing. We're studying where where the calls are and where we need to be staged, but it's going to tie in with that. And so addressing some logistical challenges kind of goes in with that as well. Utilizing emergency vehicle technicians for maintenance. So this is a specified mechanic who works on emergency vehicles. We've had some skill sets around that. Now that we have a fleet manager, that discussion's ongoing, and looking for some recommendations from our new fleet manager, who was actually here on Monday, briefing a couple items on ambulances, for how to best take care of our emergency vehicles. The department is developing a written strategy. That's in kind of the final phases of a review that it'll be sharing with staff, strategic plan. And then developing lieutenant positions, that's something that will likely be seen as an enhancement in the next budget cycle.
Kyle, can we get back to the first, the bolded item there?
Yes, sir.
Increase the number of paramedic ambulances, especially during peak demand times. Pardon my ignorance, but are you talking about specially fitted out ambulance or ambulances staffed with paramedics?
Ambulances staffed with paramedics, yes, sir.
And my understanding has been that the difficulty is hiring and retaining paramedics.
Yes, sir, that is still the case. We've seen some improvement in that. You'll see I'll just go on to the next slide here. We have seen an increase of 6 providers net over since July 1. And so we are increasing our staff, we're getting more, but industry-wide, that is a struggle for EMS. There were some legal changes over the last several years that allowed paramedics to work in other alternative practices, and that has really drawn folks away from that field, so it's something that we continue to struggle with.
Yeah, thank you.
And can I ask on that same, like when you talk about just units, I'm thinking about our franchise units.
Yes, sir.
The number that they set aside. Are they included in all of the totals in here? Like when it says units available, is it ours plus the ones that they're required to set aside in the franchise?
So
franchises?
Yeah. The recommendation was really around paramedic level ambulances. I'll let Chief Davis correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe
Well, I know we're trying to look at paramedic ambulances.
Yes, sir.
We're trying to do that. It's just on that next slide, I think, it talks about units available, and I just want to know if units available included the franchise units.
We look at it both with our own units, because the franchise are not running paramedic level units. They're using basic life support instead of advanced life support. But when we're looking at the total units, yes, sir, we are looking at franchises as well.
Okay, and none of them have paramedic?
No, sir.
Okay, got it.
So looking at a little bit of this progress impacts, and like I said, in the next couple slides, we're going to dive into some of the things that have been started here that are addressing the number of units that are on the road during peak hours. But we have seen, reported improved team morale. And so, just being amongst staff, they feel like they're being heard. They feel like things are getting better. I will say, obviously we want to make sure that's the case. And so the employee survey that we do is going to be coming out in the next month or two. And so certainly we'll be looking at that to ensure we're still making progress in those areas. That'll be across the county, but certainly we'll look at emergency services specifically as well. Having the specific data analyst position for emergency services, which we house in Matt Forsyth, has paid a lot of dividends. I've been able to see some of the work that he's producing, and a lot of the decision-making, a lot of the looking at the details and how we do things. We're able to analyze now that we hadn't been in the past. We're looking at each provider and their times for key metrics on calls. And so that's really going to pay a lot of benefits going forward as we try to address and make changes to improve the system. So that was something that was really helpful. Like I mentioned a moment ago, we have increased net 6 providers. We've brought in more than that. We've lost some, but overall our staffing is continuing to improve in the field. And then, really wanted to talk, highlight some of the key data trends here. So I pulled a
Can I
couple
ask you
slides.
one- Before you leave that.
Yes, sir.
So if you reverse that, we've added 6, how many what is our sort of vacancy part? How
Our
close are
vacancy-
we to where we
yeah.
think we'd like to be staffed?
So I think that we have about 21 vacant field positions. So folks who are EMTs, paramedics, AMTs right now.
How would that compare to a year ago?
So I looked at this for a year ago. We are about 4 up from a year ago. So we're still continuing to make improvements. So we've added staff over where we were a year ago. We've added staff over where we were July 1. We are trending in the right direction as far as how many folks we have in these positions.
Yeah, you guys could actually sit up here, and
Yeah,
that'd be
that'd be
great.
great. Come on up.
And you don't have to walk back and forth.
Yeah, so the majority of the staff that we have added are EMTs. So you have 3 credential levels of EMS providers. You have EMTs, advanced EMTs, and then paramedics. We would like to have paramedics, but we have a hard time recruiting paramedics. So what we did is we hire EMTs, and then we support them as they go through advanced EMT and paramedic school. So while we are moving in the right direction with the hires, and we've addressed some of the vacancy concerns, we have a lot of EMTs that are in work against positions. So they're in paramedic positions, but they're EMTs. They're not paramedics.
Got it.
I was going to ask how the in-house training program was doing, whether it still appeared to be working well.
Yes, it's still working well. We've partnered with Forsyth Tech and Guilford Tech, and we're having positive results with that. We just recently had 6 advanced EMTs graduated and became paramedics within the last week, and they're starting their clearance process. So we've seen the number of paramedics increase, but it's probably about a 2-year cycle when you hire an EMT for them to become a paramedic. So we weren't able to recruit paramedics, so what we did was we hired EMTs and we played the long game to make them paramedics, and then we are making efforts to try to retain those paramedics so that we don't lose them to other counties or alternative practices like critical care or the hospitals or urgent cares or doctor's offices.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I did take a couple slides from the presentation by the consultant in July, just as a reminder. So, some of the key takeaways that they saw after reviewing the data from our system is that, generally we were running 12 ambulances, operating from 6 EMS bases from the county. So we were really getting, from our ambulances that we were getting on the road, not including the franchise, we had about 12. And so franchise, I believe, was around 3 to 5 additional units on shift most of the time. And then really kind of the other piece of data from this slide I wanted to talk about was really that workload. So looking at the UHU, so the unit hour utilization, which is essentially, dumbing it down for my level, I'm sure our EMS staff could go into more detail, is how much time on shift individuals are on a call, or the truck is on a call, so they're active on that call. And so the industry standard was really around to be 0.5, and we were around 0.63 for that. So we were higher than normal. And the impact of that is really, you have folks who are just kind of running from call to call, the paperwork, the cleaning of, or the note-taking, the cleaning the ambulances, restocking the ambulances, that kind of suffers when you're moving in that direction. So it also can contribute to staff burnout, is really because you're just running from scene to scene.
That 0.63 is for what period of time?
This was looking over, I believe, a 3-year period, but I'm going to show you a chart in just a second that will
I
show you.
saw that, which looks way improved.
Well,
Well, I don't want
yes.
to say way.
Yeah.
It ends in the last month is actually less than the 0.5.
And we'll get exactly into what's going on there. Yes, sir. That is really, our EMS leadership has really, after July, sat down, thought with their leadership team about how can we make an impact on these numbers? What is the strategy? While not, alienating all of our staff, but what are some alternative strategies we can do based off the data that we've received? And so there's a new initiative that they are working on that we'll get into here for a second, but I'll just set the stage here. And so the other information that we received in July was really looking at when are our peak call times. And so you can see here that red is really when we're the busiest in our system. So they looked at each day of the week. And while you see it's a little bit busier during the week, it really it's busy even on Saturday and Sunday, from 9 to 7 p.m., 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so they analyzed that and said, really how many trucks do we need to have on the road during those hours to be able to fully address that call load? And this is what they presented back in July, which you see from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or really kind of later, it's 19, 20 trucks on the road. And we were putting 12 on the road without the franchise. And so our staff sat down, thought about what we could do. And so just about a month ago, in late October, they started to implement a new peak load shift. So our two normal shifts are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But we saw that's, the areas that are really concerning are from, 10, 11 to 8 at night, 10 at night. And so they started using staff who come in on overtime at first to put more trucks on from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And so some of the results you're going to see, some of the trends you're going to see here, and how many units are on the road during the day, and that UHU is really related to that factor that started about a month ago. So we don't have it's a small sample size, not a ton of data, but I will tell you anecdotally, because every time I see anyone from EMS, I ask them, how many trucks do you have on the road today? 18, 19 trucks on the road with those peak load shift trucks coming on. And so the next stage of that is going to be coming up in the next, I believe, week or so. I don't want to, Saturday, where it's going to move from an overtime shift to a defined shift. So they have 10 providers who are moving from other shifts into a permanent 11 to 11 peak load shift to help increase the number of trucks that we have on the road during the time where we have the most calls. And so here's the data we have as far as how many ambulances we have staffed. I will just note, this does not include those peak load shifts from the last month. So this is just
Does not include.
the peak load shifts, the overtime shifts that we had additional trucks from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. This is just day units are set, how many trucks are in the regular 7 to 7 shift. And the reason for this is because the other thing that the EMS has done is started all their new hires, they are moving to the day shift to make sure that we are getting more trucks on the road there, because that's where we are seeing the most call volume. And so it's just really kind of using the data and making strategic decisions to try to increase the number of units we have when we have the most call volume. And so you can see that trend where, early in the year, we were around 12 trucks on the road during the daytime, and we were moving up to 16 standard. And that, like I said, that's not including the additional trucks that come on at 11 a.m. To help with peak load. So that's why, I said, you're hearing 19, 18 trucks on the road. In addition to that, you also have the franchise providers' trucks who are on the road as well. Yes, ma'am?
The overtime, does that pose a problem, or are the staff agreeable to overtime?
When you describe an overtime shift, are you talking like getting four people?
Yeah, so what we did was when we looked at overtime, we had a policy that stated that they could work 72 hours a week of overtime. When we started looking at our overtime budget, we were going to be well over that. So what we did was we reduced that from 72 hours to 60 hours, and then the additional 12 hours that they could pick up had to be a special event. So special events is revenue that we're paid for, so we made that reduction. And then what we also noticed was people were working overtime during non-peak times. So we were putting more trucks on the road when we didn't need them. So we made the decision to move overtime to you could only pick up an overtime shift between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Good.
So the staff that needed the overtime hours, they needed to work it during that time. So that's when you've seen the increase of trucks on the road based on the overtime hours in that 11 to 11. And we're going to keep that, and then we're also going to move those 10 providers this Saturday to like a Monday through Friday during those peak hours as well. So we're hoping to put more trucks on consistently during those peak hours. Because overtime, one day we may have 3 trucks working overtime, and the next day we may only have 1 truck working overtime. So it's not consistent. So that was kind of the first step until we could move permanent staff to it. And then we're going to start hiring folks to go right to those 11 to 11 trucks. But we needed trained staff assigned to those times so that when we hire new hires, there's actually somewhere for them to go into that same time frame to be able to train.
Thank you.
Got it.
If I could, do we have an analysis of the factors that lead to the peak periods that we're seeing?
As far as the call volume,
Yeah, I mean, why are we hitting this? I mean, I could make a guess, but it'd be 50-50 chance of being right. You know?
yeah, so from what I can look at with the data, it seems that our busiest times are Monday through Friday during those times. And it's for when a lot of people are at work, right? And then you kind of see as people start to wake up, the call volume picks up, and then as they start to go to sleep, the call volume drops off. That's why at night there's not a lot of call volume. So instead of us running the 16 trucks at night when people are sleeping, we cut that down to 11 trucks, and then we put more trucks on the road when the population's increased and more people are in the county for work.
Our population is up slightly during the workday. But is it just that simple? When people are up and moving around, they're more likely to suffer an episode of some kind?
I think that
Have an
factors in,
accident?
like, doctor's offices are open during those times, urgent cares are open, so it's more likely for you to go there and, hey, well, you need to go to the hospital, we're gonna call an ambulance for you during those times. I think that would be one factor. But as far as actually
It may be a
why,
great question for Director for, because they're getting the 911 calls, so I think maybe the question is what type of calls you're receiving.
I think Commissioner Bessie mentioned it, more people are coming into Forsyth County, right? Motor vehicle accidents greatly increase during daytime hours. All your schools are open. People are moving about. I mean, you know, the high school in Old Richmond's district, there's 2,500 kids in a concentrated area for 8 hours a day. We probably go to Reagan, I'd say once or twice a week on some type of medical emergency, right? So you hit the nail on the head, but yep, more people are up and they're moving about. They're going to their doctor's office with a pain or a little slight breathing difficulty. The doctor in good conscience can't let them get in their car and drive to the hospital, so they're going to call 911. We send the appropriate resources, and it's just a continuous cycle.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I'll just mention, we talk about the data analysis. There's a really great dashboard that we have that looks at all this. We are actually tracking, what type of calls are coming in, and we can analyze that trend. Are we seeing increases in certain types of calls? Our medical directors are reviewing that with staff to make sure that if we see some trends moving in different directions, we can address that. So the other key data point I had highlighted was really that unit hour utilization here. And so like the chairman had mentioned, I looked ahead, you can see a really sharp decrease over the last month in that unit hour utilization. And so, certainly we think that's because we are getting more trucks on the road. What's not in this data, and we do have it broken out in the dashboard, is you can look at night shift versus day shift. And when you look at these, you can just pretty much assume that the day shift has a much higher utilization, UHU, than what's on here, and night shift has a lower. And so when you see a 0.68, I think that was in February, that means that the day shift was really in the 70s somewhere. And night shift was lower. And so what the other piece of this data is, when you look at that 0.46 for October, they're really converging. And so all 4 shifts, both day shifts and both night shifts, are all under 0.5. And it's really because you're putting more trucks on the road during the day.
That's good.
So this is another dashboard here that really breaks down the total response time, and it breaks it down by each of the different elements: call processing time, turnout time, travel time, response time. There are metrics that were shared, the consultants share their standards for where, these need to be. I'll mention, I think we're looking through this data because there's just some things we've noticed to make sure that it's accurate, specifically around the call processing time. But what you can see based off the data we have right now is, we're trending slightly in the right direction. We have a very small sample size of this enhancement with more trucks on the road. But the goal is really over the next couple of months, as we're putting more resources in the system, this number will drive down dramatically or significantly in the next coming months. But that is, just want to show you that this is the type of data that we are looking at on a monthly basis to make sure that we're seeing these trend in the right directions.
Just help me on the arithmetic. Is it on that last bottom right chart when it says total response time?
Yes, sir.
Should that not be, what is that sum to get to that?
So
It looks like it takes, if you take the 15 out, if you had 429, 199, 1398, you're at about 1839 roughly.
So I believe the response.
Not exactly.
Yeah, so these are different elements, right? So they're not going to all add up to each other. And they're looking at the 90th percentile on each of these. And so it's not an average. You're not going to add each of those up.
Got it. So
yeah.
I missed that piece.
Yeah, so the industry standard is really not to look at the average, but really look at the 90th percentile. You want to make sure you're getting to 90% of the calls in a certain time period.
So what is the difference between what is total response time and response time?
I believe, I'll let.
Yeah, so response time is from the time the ambulance is dispatched until the time the ambulance arrives on the scene. Total response time would be the time that the person calls 911 until the ambulance arrives on the scene.
So it's the total response time includes the call processing time.
Yes.
And the response time does not.
Yeah, the response time is just from the time the ambulance gets dispatched to the call.
Dispatched, but the total includes the time that the 911 operator is dealing with the call coming in, processing the call to getting it dispatched.
Right, yes, sir.
Kind of getting it out.
And so, one thing that we talked about earlier that's still in progress is really looking at where are we staging from? Where are we putting our ambulances in the system? Where is the call volume coming from? That'll be a big part of trying to drive these numbers down too, is making sure that we have vehicles in the right locations. As we've had more units in the field, we have been able to partner with a couple different fire stations, Old Richmond up in the northwest and Piney Grove in the east. We've put a truck there when we had the availability to try to spread them out geographically, but we really need to have a more designed plan of where the call volumes are and system. And so, like I said, as we get more data on from this fire study and where call volume is, that'll be something that we'll be bringing back to the board.
And the last thing, do we have any idea, and do other places, like just take Guilford, for example, does everybody sort of keep charts kind of like this? Is this off of a piece of software people would use, or is this custom, or?
This is custom for us, yes, sir. Now, I think they do track it. We've had a hard time getting that data. We got some benchmark data. I know the board asked the fire consultants to send us some of that. And so we got some call volume from other places. We've got had collections, but we had a hard time getting this data. We were still trying to work to get that in a benchmarking format between the different urban areas and then kind of our neighboring surrounding counties as well. We got that, the information we did get, we got it from Guilford, we got it from Iredell, we got it from Davie, but it wasn't one-to-one to this. So we're still working on trying to get that so we can benchmark.
Yeah, that would just be really be helpful.
Yes, sir.
Is there something, and this fire consultant should know what sort of an industry response time should be?
There are standards that were provided in the study. So, I think the standard is a 9 minutes response.
I think I remember that discussion. Yeah. I think we had that the day that we discussed this back in July.
Yes, sir.
We got into that.
Yes, sir.
Memory fails me on that.
Kyle, if at budget time, the board could address the shortages of ambulances.
Yes, ma'am.
Would that help this number?
Yes, ma'am. So that's something that I know our budget department and EMS are working on right now. It's kind of a multi-year plan for replacement. I know the conversation came up about how many ambulances we had available, and Battalion Chief Swing over here is over the logistics. He handles those. He provides some information around this. Really kind of any given time available, we have around 19 or 20 ambulances available. So as we increase the number of staff that we can have units, we're kind of reaching that point where we have enough ambulances available, but just quite. And so certainly looking at how do we increase the number that we have available consistently. And that's because, at any given time, they're out for preventive maintenance or, repairs, all sorts of things. So certainly that will be something that we'll bring to the board for the budget.
Thank you.
So moving on to the 911 recommendations, you see, and this will be across both areas, you saw some of that needing different positions or organization, either administratively or other positions that would enhance the department. So an assistant director for 911, we have filled that position at this point, as well as utilizing a quality assurance personnel. So what that is, and we reclassed to have that position as well, that's someone who is routinely auditing the calls. So they're listening to the calls, they're making sure that they are handled correctly, they're providing feedback so that we can work with our call takers, our telecommunicators, to help them train in the right areas to improve call times. And also they're auditing it in case there's a legal case that they can provide those and get those out. So that's something that we have greatly enhanced our ability. We were quite frankly a little bit behind on our audits, and we have fully caught up and have gotten a lot of accolades for how quickly we're turning those around. But it also has allowed us to review where we can improve and making sure that we're providing the right sort of training to our telecommunicators. So that was a really critical position as well. Consider utilizing Station 9 as a primary answering point. So that is our backup 911 center at the county's fire department. The 911 was there for a significant amount of time while we were doing the radio changeover, while equipment was being moved. Certainly the Public Safety Center is our primary 911 center. So that they have moved back there. That is our primary location. We will continue to utilize the backup station, probably more often than we had in the past, really to make sure that the computer systems are updating, it's still functional. But certainly, we want to make sure that we're using that one. The Public Safety Center is our primary 911 center, though. Reevaluating the background checks needed to help with staff recruitment. So this is really, as being at the Public Safety Center, there's some requirements from the Sheriff's Office, CJIS requirements, and also because we're using a joint CAD, anyone who's using that has to go through that security process. So not something that we can really change, but I think it was a issue at some point. I don't think that has come up as an issue with recent hires as well.
Tell me, you're talking faster than I can listen.
I apologize.
Talk a little bit about that third bullet, the evaluating.
Yeah.
Tell me, because you said you completed it, so you evaluated it, and what did you come up with?
Essentially, it's not
The sheriff's office, I take it, has been doing the background checks.
Yeah.
And what were you comparing it to?
Yeah. Well,
Somebody else, obviously we do, our HR does background checks. Are there different kinds of background checks?
I'll chime in on this one. So anyone who works in the sheriff's office is required to have a higher clearance level. It's called a CJIS clearance that the sheriff's office requires, they say by sheriff standard. So even when we have custodians, maintenance workers, anyone that is working in a sheriff's office facility has to have this CJIS clearance. The 911 staff during the fire study, essentially their concern was that individuals were being denied an offer to work as a telecommunicator because they did not pass the CJIS clearance. But you may pass the county clearance and may not pass the CJIS clearance because it's required higher. And so they wanted us to evaluate that. Well, for me, it's complete because it requires a CJIS clearance. There's nothing else we really can do about that. That is part of the sheriff's standard. So we marked it as complete because that is just the requirement, and that's just something we need to communicate back to staff.
When I ask this, maybe a dumb question, but when you talk about utilizing Station 9 as a primary answering point, and we're going to have, folks working there, they're not working in the sheriff's office.
So we're not using Station 9 as the primary answering point. That was one of the...
Oh, you decided not to do that?
Yes, sir. So that is the backup, and we will utilize it more often, but the county has made investments at the Public Safety Center. You have the sheriff's 911 and our county 911 both located there. We have the stations there. So that is the primary...
I thought that was great synergy and a great thing to do, but how many people are we having screened out on this background check deal? A lot?
I think that was an issue a long time
Well,
ago.
the fact that this showed up to be studied tells me it's not just insignificant.
Commissioners, there was an instance where when they relocated from Station 9 down to the Public Safety Center, I think that was 2017, we did lose one employee. They cleared all the HR background checks, but the CJIS, they didn't get a clearance on. And there has been one hiring process since I've been in my position where we made 5 job offers and 4 of those 5 couldn't get past the CJIS clearance. So I think it's going to be a roller coaster ride, just depending on the individual. Logistically, Station 9, the airport backup center, is not feasible for us to operate out of 24 hours a day.
Well, yeah,
Office space is limited, fire's grown in some of their staffing levels. So we'll utilize it more frequent so that in the event of a man-made natural disaster or inclement weather, you can literally go and flip the lights on and go to work and not have to worry about the systems and the processes not being up to date. So.
And we can get data from HR. I mean, again, as being someone in HR, the CJIS clearance process has not been overall an issue. So yes, you may have had isolated incidents, but in general, it's really not been a huge problem. But have we had to decline some individuals for that? Yes. Is it a substantial amount? I would say probably 2%, and that is just going off of memory. I don't think it's a huge problem.
That's fair.
It may not be an issue in light of what you just indicated, worth spending a lot of time on, but just from my understanding, what does CJIS require that our normal HR doesn't require?
I would have to get an answer on that. That's handled by the sheriff's office side of the house. We utilize the same CAD system as they do. And there is some,
Computer automated, it's, you don't explain.
yeah, that's how we dispatch calls, okay? That's the system that we utilize. We share that with the sheriff's office. So in doing that, we do have access to some law enforcement sensitive data, right? Names, date of birth, aliases, last known addresses. On occasion, some criminal history comes up if we're going to an address for a medical call and there's been a warrant issued there, whatever. So the ability to have that access requires that CJIS clearance.
State or national?
That's national,
Interpol?
probably, yeah.
For my edification, just if you could summarize that in writing later.
Yeah, absolutely, no
Thank you.
problem. Thank you.
And then the next item here was reevaluating the county's annual leave and sick leave policies, procedures for personnel that work non-traditional schedules. So this was really looking at how much leave, folks who are accruing, working different hour schedules. And that was something that in this current budget, the board did adjust. There's a different accrual rate if you're a 40-hour employee, a 42, or a 56-hour employee. And so looking at what's in progress there, so as our staff level has grown, as our capacity's grown, as we got an assistant director, making sure that our training manual, our training process is up to date has become a priority. So there is a plan in the next 90 days to have that completely redone and make sure it's accurate, up to date with all the current procedures. But that is something that has been a little bit difficult to get to with staffing levels where they were. We have seen some increase in staffing and telecommunicators, so that was the next recommendation, is make sure that we're increasing staffing. So this is about vacancies, right? This is not about positions. It's about getting people in the positions that we have. You'll see in the next slide we have increased net 1 since July, and that includes four folks coming in. So it is a hard position to fill, but certainly as we have a good training program, we can bring more people in and get them up to speed to be able to do that. And then evaluating and reporting on demonstrated performance for 911. So that's part of what we looked at just now, and the performance measures and the data that we're looking at is really, and part of what the quality assurance position is doing is really continuing to look at that and report on it monthly.
And how do you do that? Because you were kind enough to investigate the near fatality for me last month when the dispatcher failed to categorize it as a priority 1. So the individual had to be taken to the hospital with a severed or breached radial artery, and fortunately survived and is recovering. So what is the evaluation process there? And what is on the training generally? I mean, are they trained on basic human anatomy, emergency situations, hemodynamic stability? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So it's nationally accredited. That's what APCO stands for. That's who we get certified through for emergency medical dispatch credentials. Again, the challenge is too often you've got a short window of opportunity. You're asking the lay public to try to give you, accurate information, right? And sometimes it's the worst day of their life, worst time of their life. They're upset. They're concerned about the well-being of their loved one, friend in that instance, right? So the cooperation between us, the telecommunicator, and the caller is most critical. When you're asking questions and you're not getting the proper feedback, at that point, the TC is instructed to try to take over the call, right? We've got to give some calming phrases. We call them by name if they've provided their name at that point. But yeah, we are credentialed at the EMD level, and that is also through the state of North Carolina. We audit 7 to 10% of all EMS calls every month. That goes for every telecommunicator in the room. So we're dispatching around 7,000 calls a month on average. That also includes our private EMS service, and that's for every person in the room that is credentialed to that level. And there's some key questions that we have to ask: level of consciousness, breathing status, any altered mental status, hemorrhage control in that instance, right? So yeah, we're evaluating it continually. Where before, prior to this person coming into this position, we were 4,000 audits behind. So you were literally auditing calls from 4 months in the past. Yeah. 4 months of doing it the wrong way and then learning about it today doesn't fix the problem, right? We're literally doing last month's audits right now, so it's more real time, right? And then we got to audit also every cardiac arrest call that comes through our center as well.
Now, I realize there can be misinformation
Yes, sir.
given to the dispatcher, but I understood here, there was profuse
Yes, sir.
bleeding.
Can I interject? I am going to respectfully ask that we not discuss potential legal matters outside of closed session.
Let me ask you this
Yes, sir.
question. So what is the evaluation process after an incident occurs? I mean, you have an M&M, what do you do?
Yes, sir. So, of course, I engaged, once I was engaged by Deputy Manager Haney, I engaged the medical director whose license we operate under. He was brought up to speed on the situation, as well as Chief Davis. We've all consulted each other, had a situation where, at what point do I not need to talk about personnel matters? Okay. It has been addressed internally following county policy. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
So just looking at some of the progress impacts here, once again, just kind of following up with the same, and you'll see this throughout, just improved team morale reported specifically around kind of that change in structure for the 3 areas. We went significantly kind of into that quality management review and how important that is for this. And then we're starting to see some staff improvement. We've got the positions posted continually, so we hope to bring in even more telecommunicators before the end of the year, just continuously trying to get that staffing up. And then moving to fire, so looking at this, one of the big things that we've done in fire, obviously we spent a lot of time over that in the last year. We did just recently with the establishing the fire commission, who'll be meeting soon. A lot of the things that were coming in this, that came through in the assessment will be brought to that commission for study and recommendations to the board. But just looking at kind of what we have completed. So this was reevaluating the amount of leave earned by 24-hour shift personnel. This is in the completed category. We did look at that accrual rate and adjust it in this year. I just will need to mention, there are still concerns from staff around the amount they have and other, the amount of leave fire personnel get between different departments is vastly different. And so there's still some concern about that, but we did address that in this past budget. And then looking at in progress, so we have reassessed the department staffing program with the Vienna Fire Department. As you may recall, that is where we have a volunteer fire department where the staff are county employees. That was something that there was some questions around the legality of that with the state retirement system. We worked with the county attorney and county HR to make sure that we felt comfortable with that, and we did.
So that was addressed. It is still in progress, so essentially because we're looking at kind of the model for the entire system as far as pay and benefits, and that will be something that's brought to the Fire Commission. And so this is a different model than most fire departments in our system, and so we really just try to want to make sure that we're looking at how we work together instead of compete against each other. Reassessing the effectiveness of the current Station 9 squad program operations, so that's our manpower support trucks. And there were a number of items under that. That is something that we're continuing to do. We are increasing the staffing level throughout the system. However, we see that these units are still very critical to getting the number of personnel on scene and responding quickly. But as the vision for that system starts to appear, we'll continue to analyze what the need is for these and what their role is, as well as where they're located in the system. Designating a squad shift supervisor with a separate response vehicle. So this was one of the areas. And so essentially the captain on duty at this point is on one of those 09 trucks. And this was saying to get that captain off so they could, go around and roam. That's something that I know that you'll be seeing as part of the next year's budget as a request. Conducting a workload analysis for Fire Marshal's Office against the industry consensus standards. So that's something that we'll be doing on a staffing level. We did provide an additional inspector, but you'll likely see some requests around that for the next year's budget. Keep all emergency response vehicles in excellent operating condition, including the ARF truck at the airport. We did talk about, now that we have a fleet manager, we're certainly looking into this and what the best models are for that. One significant occurrence that happened just last meeting, I believe, where we approved the contract for the ARF truck. Now, that's going to take a while to get here, but we have that on order. But then looking at our other response vehicles that are ours as well and making sure that they're being replaced on a certain schedule will be part of the capital improvement process that we're looking at for fire as well. Reevaluate the current internal training program for the fire departments. Once again, something they're looking at and should have some requests with. And then establishing a career ladder within the department is something that they're working through the reclass and HR on as well. So what we've seen here is really improved team morale reported. We'll check in with that with our employee survey. Really that fire commission is a key part of this as we start to look at the system and how it should operate together. Having that in place and bringing studies to them is really important. And then using data to make some informed decision making. So in summary, looking at the areas of progress made, we have seen, anecdotally, that increase in staff morale from changing the structure and making some of these investments in the system. We've had a lot of structures in place to really review data and look at this in a different way than we have in the past to make the adjustments we need to impact service levels. And we have seen some of our key service delivery metrics trending in the positive direction. So we want to make sure that it continues to happen, and we'll continue to monitor that. And then working on additional areas. So obviously we looked at that response time chart, and so we want to see that start to really improve over the next couple months as we implement new models. Capital, the facilities and vehicles, like we said, some of the things you could do within the budget year, some things really revolve around the budget year, but that will certainly be something that you will see a lot of in this coming budget process is, what are our plans for facilities and vehicles, and that will be also tied up in the assessment that our consultants doing on the fire service as well, which we should get in December, preliminary results on. And then, really just continuing to work on the system vision and policies and procedures, making sure that we are responding to the data in the right way and have it structured the right way. But you heard throughout this presentation, there will be some budget requests for this coming fiscal year to address some of these recommendations as well. I know that was a lot of information, but happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, it was a very, very positive report. I mean, a lot of good trends and a lot of good work. Appreciate the work of all the folks that are here and everybody, but obviously want to acknowledge those that are here.
Absolutely.
It was great, and I think we get maybe do this again in another maybe 4 months out. Again, roughly to do that would be great, because this is an important area, and it's great to hear some this kind of progress. One of the obviously most life-saving issues that we're dealing with every day, and being prepared.
Yes, sir.
So we'll look forward to more. But I guess in the next 4 months we'll have the employee survey completed, that'll be kind of a quantitative assessment of the morale things, which I think is critical to the success of all the units. I mean, all of our emergency response, which is good. So I really appreciate the update. Unit hour utilization is good. Appreciate the working within our budget, getting more trucks available during the day, using data as we should, and to do that, and realize what a demanding job it is, and I understand that better. Thank you. Any other comments?
To see them in person sometimes when their internet went down, I went to 911 and just saw them working without being able to see where the fire trucks were, and I mean, they do an amazing job, so.
Right, I agree. Thank you very much. All right, we will adjourn until 2.